Hey folks, welcome back to the 4099 podcast with your hosts Dima and
Bum Nick.
Bum Nick.
Bum.
Bum bum.
Bum ba dum bum.
Bum ba-dum bum bum.
Bum bum.
Bum ba-dum bum bum.
Bum bum.
Bada bada bum bum bum.
Bum bum.
Bada bada bum bum bum.
Bum bum.
Bada bum bum bum.
Bum bum.
Bum 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 bum.
Bum bum.
Bum 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 bum.
Bum bum.
Bum bum bum.
It's
Nick.
It's Nick, and we have, what do you call them? A repeat offender.
Yeah.
Oh no. That is how you're introducing me for the show?
That's how we introduce all the repeats.
All right. Okay.
Sam.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here again.
It's
Samuel.
just Sam.
Samuel. Yeah.
Samuel.
Yeah. Hey.
What's shaking?
It's good to be here.
Well, Nick just finally got the opportunity to pop the top, or what would that be? Would that be popping or would
Uncork.
We just add
Uncork.
1 ounce.
I saw that one. That was hilarious. Just this white woman, like saying, "We're just gonna add 1 shot of vodka," and then she just keeps on going. Oh god.
It's that kind of Sunday evening, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing that probably folks won't know is we're recording on a unconventional day, but we have.
You do what you gotta.
Yeah, we do what we got to do, and today we kind of have a super special, but also a friend. I feel like a part of the family at this point because you are a repeat offender.
I wasn't gonna say it, but I'm glad you did.
So we have Sam back on, like we said, and we wanted to talk about, along with a whole bunch of shit, we wanted to talk about the current situation in India with
Yeah, so we're seeing all kinds of wild shit around the world. We're looking at a bunch of civil unrest in America, the UE, EU, Europe. EU.
Can you hand me that?
I can't talk.
Jaeger?
But
The Jaeger.
we haven't really talked a lot about India, and I think that's something to really get into because it's the second largest population in the world.
You know what I completely fucked up on is I we didn't talk about what the hell, like, how life has been for you in the last couple of weeks.
Post your first episode.
We just like, because last time we spoke, and just to give if we have any new listeners and viewers, welcome. We are very glad you came here. But if you haven't already done so, Samuel, because he's a repeat offender, I think what do we do episode 13, I believe, right? Or is it 13 or anyway, a previous episode. Be sure to go back in the YouTube archive for that. But we kind of talked about India a little bit, not just India, but we talked about essentially travel, right?
Yeah.
And we got a little bit into immigration, and
we talked about your time you spent there
in India specifically, and
I guess
not giving anyone the proper context.
I guess as a refresher, let's open that up for a minute and just give us, the viewership, the context of what your engagement in India was all about.
Sure. I was there as a Fulbright scholar, English teaching assistant, which means that I applied for funding to go there and teach, and they paired me with a school. They trained me to teach English as for speakers of other languages. to teach English as a foreign language, and so I did, and so I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a city called Varanasi, which is one of the oldest cities in the world, and a very densely populated and culturally rich place.
Yeah. And
what was that shit you were telling us about? You were like drinking over there. You get like little stands.
Oh man. Yeah.
Everybody was drinking it. It was like, wasn't it something to do with like hemp or something? Or it was like a drink.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So not everyone is drinking it. Not very many people are drinking it. And in fact, a lot of times they're like foreigners who will go and they'll be like, "Oh, I want to get high," you know. But
as foreigners tend to do.
Yeah, yeah. You know, some, you know, tourists go to India looking for a certain kind of experience, and it's available to them, you know, like so there, you might have heard of a lassi. You might have gone to an Indian restaurant and gotten a mango lassi. But you can, in Varanasi, in this city, it's legal for, in quotation marks, religious use. Mm. So you can actually buy cannabis lassis.
It's kind of like here, you know how people say, "Oh, it's for medical use." Yeah, kind of like that, but not really. But along the same kind of playing field. It's like you're using like,
but you drink it though, right?
Right, the religious or the religious label, and then some people use that religious label to just use it recreationally or whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people have religious experiences on it, I guess. So,
or I guess
you could label it that. So I don't really know exactly what the reason is. There might be a spoken reason, and then a reason that is, you know, just about, you know, attracting tourists, maybe. I don't know, but yeah.
So that's what that drink is. There you go.
Oh,
it's funny to me that is the thing that is remembered right off the bat.
That's the first time I ever heard of like a weed smoothie or whatever.
Yeah, it's yogurt.
That's wild.
That is. I think that's a super memorable moment just because I'd never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you usually get like, you know, the edibles and shit like that, but
and
not really.
I don't think we really talked about it, but like in India, that you can get dairy products, but you don't do cow. Right? That's a big no.
Yeah, you don't eat beef. Yeah, you don't eat beef.
And so cows there are kind of looked at as a super what would it be called? I guess religious, right? Or for lack of a better term, I don't really.
So
all I know is that when a cow's on the road, you wait. Yeah.
Well, I am not really like the person to ask about these things. I'm not an Indian. I'm not a Hindu. Mm. I don't really know what the answer is. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
But you respect the cow in India.
But you respect the motherfucking cow.
Yeah.
Or else.
Yeah.
Yeah, or else. But yeah, talking about all this stuff, I feel like now that we have built somewhat of a better context,
okay,
we can dive into that to what we, you know, kind of started off wanting to focus on, which is and you can almost call it like this small revolution of farmers, right? Kind of coming together and taking a stand for themselves, really, right?
Yeah, so to build into that, in November of this past year, the farmers of India began rioting in Delhi. And that's because of these laws that have been passed by their government that kind of side with large food production companies to where they can essentially get the food, like the agricultural goods from farmers, super dirt cheap. And it screws the farmers out of all the income that they need to basically live and keep their farms going.
Right.
So they have this surplus of food that's going for next to nothing, and it's ruining the farmers' lives. So
they're being extorted.
Yeah. There's a lot of collusion in the government right now.
And we were watching a kind of a mini documentary-esque kind of thing that was explaining the exact in a graphic what was happening. And you know, you'd have the farmers produce the, whether it be, you know, wheat or barley or, you know, all these different kind of grain products or just products.
They were saying it was mostly wheat and rice.
And they would have to legally, or under this document, have to go to a market
called a manda.
Mandi.
Yeah. And essentially abide by a certain chart that basically labeled so there was a label for each product, and there would be a minimum price that you'd have to pay for each product. And then once that agreement was done between the farmer and the buyer at the specific market, at the mandi, then from there it would either go to a supermarket or a third kind of party, or directly to the customers. And what was happening was there was a lot of back and behind the door and under the table deals before that product even made it to the mandi, the kind of the market, and that's where the problem was happening. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, it sounded like the initial buying from the farmers was being moved to outside of the mandi setting because these mandatory price minimums were no longer in effect. So the market was being deregulated to give advantage to the corporate buyers rather than the people at the on the ground.
Yeah, which is a big problem because eventually those farmers can't sustain their level of like output, and they have to close down. And then once enough farms close down, they can't feed their own country.
Yeah,
and that's a huge issue. That's not an oversight. That's just neglect.
Yeah,
and it was. Again, going back to the specific thing that we watched beforehand, it was established in, the 70s?
So, no, it wasn't established in the 70s. What we were seeing was in the 70s, agriculture made up about 50% of the income in the country. As of, I think it was 2019, 2020, it was down to about 15%.
Yeah, so from 50 to 15.
That's a huge drop, and that's just all basis off of the neglect or from the neglect of the government on farmers. Like they're basically saying they're turning their cheek on them is what they're doing. And it's like they're saying almost they don't want to have agriculture as a part of their economic stability. They want to, it sounds like to me, they want to outsource food. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
You don't do that any other case.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a surplus of it, right? Like the logical thing would be if you have a surplus of food, why are people still hungry? And why are people still...
Right. You should be able to feed your people pretty cheaply if you're producing your own food as a country.
Yeah. It looks like this is clearly, the government working alongside corporate interests rather than interests of the farmer.
And we see this, obviously not only in India, around the world. And we can speak to it as civilians and members of the society in America. We see this kind of stuff all the time, where the company ends up essentially, we see it now, right? The perfect example would be the, monopoly companies, right? And how if they're not checked, they become so big that they just swallow up local businesses. And that happened during COVID, right? Where, the Walmarts, the Amazons, all of these, the Starbuckses, all of these different huge corporations were starting to essentially find new ways and new technology in order to survive and make more money. But the local businesses had to close down and they didn't have any other alternatives to sell their product.
Yeah.
So it's problematic. And we feel like we should definitely, dive into this topic a little bit more and tackle it because it's super relevant today, right? So I know you have been, obviously, as you before said, in India for quite some time, and you were there through a program, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah, and you kind of got to really be there and experience it firsthand, and see how. I mean, while you were there, did you see the impact of agriculture in everyday life, or how was it for you looking at that?
So my closest relationship with agriculture was buying produce and seeing vegetable markets. And so where I was living in India, most of the time you bought your vegetables and your fruits from people selling them in carts outside.
He got that shit a la carte, boy.
Yeah, direct.
Fresh.
Direct.
Yeah. So,
suck it, Fresh Market. You can't beat these fucking deals.
And when we were watching that video, you know, it was like I had seen places where, you know, these produce were sold at wholesale, you know, in large quantities. And so I had an image for that. And I also know that that people cared a lot about what they were paying for stuff. So if I got vegetables, someone would ask me, you know, how much did you pay for it? And I'm like, I paid, you know, this amount of rupees. And then sometimes they'd be like, oh, that's correct. Or sometimes they'd be like, oh, no, you paid too much. So when I heard that, you know, there were government price minimums for sellers in order to protect their livelihood, which I think that was the intention of the price minimums. I'm not positive on that fact. I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense because everyone wants to buy it for as cheaply as they possibly can, you know. So in that context, that made sense. I made that connection right there. Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of the time, whenever, you know, me, you, us, and anyone else, right, that's buying food, we don't really think, because maybe we don't have a system similar to the one in India, but we don't really think of the person that's providing this food for us. We think of Whole Foods or Harris Teeter or, you know, whatever.
Food Line,
whatever.
Dixie,
Yeah.
Walmart.
We think of those because we're buying the product from them.
Right.
As the people that produce these food. We don't really, as people buying, as consumers.
I ain't never seen Walmart grow no eggplant.
Right, yeah, exactly.
No, they don't do that.
These are the Walmart orange fields.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so, you know, we don't really think of an actual person owning land and producing this food and what it takes in order to produce these food, because it takes a lot of resources to, you know, if we're talking about fruits, for instance, to, you know, not only, you know, make sure that these, you know, these fruit trees are kept in the correct setting, right?
Yeah.
Watered, you know, whether it be like, what is it, fertilizer, right?
Yeah,
all of these different things go into agriculture that we don't think about. So
sure.
it really, once you start looking at it from that perspective, it really just, you know, kind of pisses you off that, you know, that there's a situation like that currently going on, and no one's really done anything about it until now, really. I mean, there hasn't been an outrage, which also, on the other hand of the coin, the same coin, it's good to see, because finally there is a situation where people are standing up and really fighting for themselves. Yeah. Right?
But let's be completely transparent here. They have to, because no one else will.
Right.
And if they do not stand up, and if like people don't support them, they'll starve.
Now,
their businesses, their farming businesses will die.
Yeah.
With that said, this is the interesting point, and I feel like because we got into it in detail before we even started rolling here. Is, you know, we
there was a lot of yelling. There was almost blood drawn.
It was
intense,
brutal.
But you know, something that we talked about and something that you personally experienced was in India there's still a caste system. And so in such a system, people are basically regulated to living life at a certain level.
Yeah.
And that's what was so great for me to see, is even living in such a system where you really can't stand up for yourself, there are people still fighting to stand up for themselves. It's a lot easier here in America to set up a march or something like that, and to march and to talk about the things that are going wrong. It's a lot harder for a society that's built off of a system that they can't really go above their certain level,
their pay grade, so to speak.
Right, to speak out. And they are...
It seems like in that case, though, you have two speeds. You have, well, I'm going to act my part and live my life on the lower tier of the caste system and be quiet until my life gets so bad that the only thing I have to do is act out and protest. That seems a little off. That seems a little irrational to think that, like, I've got either to suck up and take this, you know, kick in the jaw, or I've got to burn the city down.
Yeah, sink or swim.
Yeah. As far as I've seen, like, there's just people in India protest. Like, people in America protest, people in India protest for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. Yeah.
Okay, so there is protest. There is people, you know, standing up and speaking out, and it's not just like a okay, I'm just gonna sit over here and kind of take my whatever, you know.
Yeah, the public. I mean, the I've seen like political rallies and streets. I've seen political parades and stuff. It's not the same thing as a grassroots protest, of course, but yeah, people use the public spaces for protest and stuff on a range of issues.
A lot of soapbox action.
Yeah, a lot of soapbox action. Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So then I've got to ask, do you think that that's effective? Do you think that there's a lot of change that comes about from these protests?
So,
and then I'm also curious, who's in charge of the government right now?
So from what I understand, the current administration, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the ruling party right now called the BJP, they have such wide support from the public that I've seen, and they have such corporate connections, and they have such strong political dominance in India that protests. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how much protesting can do. I'm not super optimistic about protests changing law.
All right. What was the guy's name? Modi?
Narendra Modi, yeah.
So when did Modi come into power, or like who did he supersede? Like was Gandhi before him? Like was Gandhi ever like the leader of the country? Because I understand that he was a huge, like he was a monocle of like Hindu like unity, I guess. Like he was like a pinnacle in like the British like occupancy in the country, and like he was a huge advocate against that. He was like Indian people or Hindu people need to live by Hindu rule.
Okay. So to my knowledge, and I'm not like at all an expert on this, I've just kind of like gathered it, you know. I haven't taken classes, you know. I've just gathered it. I've just like
absolutely
tried to learn, you know. But from what I understand, you know, even before Indian independence in like 1948, 1947, I think, 1948, even before that,
Israeli independence as well.
Yeah. Even before that, there were kind of two main sort of strains of Indian politics, two legs, right? So Mahatma Gandhi is on the leg of what would now be called like the Congress Party, and then the other one would be like the RSS and the BJP, and I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. Yeah. But in the current political sphere, those are kind of the dominant parties, and Congress has its lineage to Mahatma Gandhi and to Nehru, who was the first prime minister of India. And so the RSS and the BJP were aligned with more of like the ruling landowning class of India.
Okay, so more of the bureaucracy.
If
you're talking about land ownership, I think a lot about bureaucrats, and I think about like administrative like belief.
Right, not the farmers.
Yeah.
There were people who were also working alongside the British, the British Raj.
They're like, how can I make money off this opportunity?
Right. They were working alongside the colonial powers in India during British colonial times. So, and then Mahatma Gandhi had a message of like equality across castes. He said, you know, like no matter what caste you're from, no matter how much money you have, you know, you can clean toilets. Like we all can clean toilets. Like it's okay.
Would you call him the Bernie Sanders of his time?
that is a super interesting
comparison.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe so. You know, a lot of the rhetoric does kind of feel that way, you know, but maybe this whole, you know, interclass, you know, conflict comes way back in every place, you know. But in India right now, so the big thing about the RSS and the BJP is that they're Hindu nationalist. They're Hindu nationalists. They are like explicitly pro-Hindu. And so there are also kind of like very obvious discriminatory and oppressive even laws and actions, government actions, to suppress, Muslim power in all spheres, social power. One way that they do this is they try to control schools' curriculum.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. So there's like interreligious conflict in India as well, and the Hindu Nationalist Party is quite dominant. So,
and so going back to Gandhi, he was, as I learned, he was assassinated, right?
Yeah, Gandhi was assassinated.
And in what nature was he murked?
I think it was in public by surprise.
Holy, like
by an assassin.
Like guns, knives, bomb.
I don't know. I don't remember. I just think of the scene in the movie Gandhi. Yeah, I have that image in my head.
That I don't. You got to be a real dirty pool player to kill a guy like Gandhi.
Especially the guy that said an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Or, words like beautiful, beautiful words and things like that. It's just, it's unfortunate to see. But as we know, the power needs to stay somewhere, right? And I'm sure.
So like
that was a.
I always thought that like everyone in India thought like Gandhi. I did. I honestly thought that. I was like, if I ever go to India, I'm gonna have a really like serene time because everyone's gonna be like thinking in unison, and call that a huge like misconception. But I kind of look forward to the idea of maybe visiting there one day.
I think it sounds like you feel a little disenchanted because you're seeing all of these stories and news clips of really chaotic things when we had this image in our heads of
I think that's like the biggest reason I wanted to do this episode is because like when I look at like the Hindu religion and the people of India, like I like to think that
you think peace,
it's a beautiful. I like to think that it's a beautiful place, and the people are all on the same page and working together to build this like awesome existence for themselves.
So, like, I know that we think about. So, one thing I want to do is just kind of like bring complexity into the conversation.
Let's do it. Please
bring diversity into the conversation. So, there's like when we were watching videos of North India. It was basically about Delhi, a little bit about Bihar, and about Haryana, and another state.
And these are cities in the north.
This is all places in the north.
I think I saw one that started with the J and Calcutta.
Calcutta? Okay, yeah. Calcutta's in the east. And then also a little bit about Assam, where they've been building some camps or facilities based on this immigration law that was passed a year ago. That was a big,
like, Muslim-Hindu conflict, right?
Yeah, that looks like they were trying to, like, take Muslims' citizenship away. People who had lived there for generations.
They're trying to China India, basically.
It sounds like it's very similar to the immigration things we're seeing in the U.S. right now. And
I was relating it towards China.
Really. Right. Well, the Chinese thing, like China has this huge thing against, like, governmentally against, like, Uyghurs, Muslim communities. And so, like, we're seeing a lot of bullshit in the fucking global
people
like,
aren't understanding.
Frame.
Yeah, people aren't understanding that, like, all people have the same value. And that, like, we all have things to learn from each other.
Yeah, it's like we did not learn anything from World War II.
Well, that was something that we were talking about again. It's like we talked about a lot, but before the camera started rolling. But like us specifically, we were talking about people getting stuck in this loop, right? In this loop of everyday existence and the comfort of everyday existence.
I was about to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so anyway, North India. We're talking about North India, right? Even in the regions that we're looking at, there are many languages. That video we saw, when people were talking, they weren't just talking in one language. They're talking in at least two languages. If you go, and those are languages related to like one family, right? If you go further south, you'll find many languages that aren't even related linguistically to those languages spoken in the north.
Which is crazy. I think that speaks to, like, because it's such a huge population that you can have different sects or groups of people that are almost not related inside the same national like boundary.
One
wild.
motto of India is unity in diversity. People say that, right? So you can see how people are. India is not one thing, And on one hand, there's a feeling of national pride of unity and diversity, and on the other hand, you see people in the name of national pride, like oppressing people in the name of like
minorities,
religious, oppressing minorities in the name of like religious homogeneity,
and that's a dangerous
thinking
thing.
that they're right. Yeah,
especially when it comes to religion.
Yes,
because religion is something that almost supersedes culture in a way, right? Like people live their lives based on religion.
Right.
People
give their lives
right based on religion.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you truly have national pride, you need to understand that religion is not something that belongs on the streets. Like that's something that stays behind closed doors. Like that's an old practice in American culture, is that you don't talk about politics or religion in public.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that came from a safe place and a very welcoming, open, unifying idea that we may not be on the same page, but we can work together. We can live together. We can be friends. We can be family.
I hope that those are our values. I think some people they say that and they think that they hear that and they believe it, but then they have such a narrow definition of what religion is that they end up excluding people, like
subconsciously almost.
Yeah, subconsciously or directly and consciously. Like, we did, when we said the national anthem, not the national anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance growing up in schools, right? Like, and we said God or whatever, like, were we talking about like
the same God?
The Muslim God? Were we talking about the Hindu God?
Yeah.
Or were we talking about the Christian God? And so, and like, maybe you could say like it's talking about everyone's God or whatever, but depending on who you ask, you might get different answers.
It's kind of like when people go to join the the brick masons, stone masons. Like they don't ask you what God you pray to, but they do ask that you like. And I'm not a mason. All right, just to be clear. I've talked to a lot of Masons.
Oh, you're talking about Freemasons.
Freemasons.
I was thinking we were talking about like laying bricks.
Thank you, Dima. Dima's actually like got my back on this one. But yeah, so like when an individual decides that they would like to become a Mason, they're hit with a barrage of questions, and one of the first and foremost is that you believe in a single deity, and they don't necessarily care which deity it is, but you have to believe in a higher power. And I think that's, to a degree, unifying. But I also think that people can contribute to a cause or a purpose without believing in anything as far as like a higher power. Like, I think that someone that has just a general understanding of common good and rationale, that stuff's not necessarily important.
Right. It becomes problematic, I think, when there is kind of these terms that are thrown around, like God. And even if you don't believe in the same God, there's always going to be someone in that relationship that believes in their God more so than...
Yeah, it's like when you're in a romantic relationship, there's always going to be somebody that's more attracted into the relationship than the other person.
Right. And that person eventually makes it about their God. Even though we're all talking about our own individual God, that specific person that has a more of an attachment to their specific God makes it more about them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that term is then transformed into the initial kind of intended thing for God, or for whatever term we're using here.
Yeah. The issue to me is when all the questions of like, what God do you believe in? How much do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God at all? When those have anything to do with a person's value, that's when when there are problems in society. because
That's when the true nature comes out. That's when the claws come out.
That's when the intention comes out.
it's like we need to live in a society where we feel like we will be valued the same way no matter what we believe.
Yeah, that's when Medea starts hitting people with the bag, you know, smacking around with that Louis Vuitton that she got at TJ Maxx. Boy, act right.
Yeah.
Ain't you got no raisin?
Yeah. Yeah, classic, by the way. Classic movie.
I love Medea.
But yeah, no, I mean,
If anybody wants to sit down and watch Medea with me later, let me know.
Yeah, Nick is definitely a lover of the good cinema. But yeah,
bring it back.
Bringing it back. But anywho, so we did talk about. We do want to concentrate on a certain topic here, but so we talked a little bit about. You were talking specifically about how the video that we watched, focused on kind of the upper part of India. And it wasn't really inclusive of the southern parts of India. Now, what do you see is there a huge difference between the north and the south?
Let's see that
these
divide.
different regions of India? Like, what did you exactly mean when you were talking about that? Like in that video, do you understand? Do you get where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I guess why I said that was we were like, is India like this? Is India like that? Is India like this? It's like India's like all of that. It's just like it's that there's that much variety there.
Right.
It's a place of like great diversity, and maybe the farmers in southern parts of India are also affected by this. Maybe they're not. That just wasn't something that was answered in the video.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what might end up happening, in our minds is we have this idea of what India is based on what the news tells us, but it's really only talking about a few regions, and then there are these other regions too.
And then there's a narrative that's kind of drawn in your mind.
Right. Yeah.
Which I'm glad that you brought that point across, because a lot of the time we catch ourselves in that kind of area and in that kind of position where we're looking at an article, or maybe where we see something online and then we don't know anything about it, and then that's the first bit of information that we get about that certain topic. Mm-hmm. And then that becomes our kind of knowledge.
Your entire reference is off of this one tidbit of knowledge of a conflict that is presented one-sidedly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And what it is actually is a very, very complex mm-hmm. thing.
Yeah.
That we actually have to take time to trying to understand.
So to really be able to develop that opinion and that perception of it is you need to devote diligence and a deeper dive and do some actual freelance research mm-hmm. based off of accredited articles.
Yes. And having said that, there remains this beautiful kind of, again, uproar. And I think it's just another uproar of people saying, hey, look, we had it.
Yeah.
We're tired. Yeah. We want at least some sort of equality.
Those protesters, they were coming from far away.
Yeah.
And they said, we will stay here as long as it takes. Yeah.
Occupy Delhi.
I mean, do you know anyone who is willing to make that kind of sacrifice for a protest? Well, if they mean it,
if your
they're not
livelihood
messing around.
Is staked upon this, then I'm in.
They don't have a choice. That. Wow.
They're out there with their tractors, flipping buses and shit.
Yes.
Running through barricades, and the cops are out there with their tear gas and their batons, and they're beating these boys on the ass.
Yeah.
I'm like, leave that boy's ass alone.
Yeah, for real.
And so here's my next question, because we kind of got into it earlier. Was we at one point said that from the 70s until now, or until 2019, we saw a 50% contribution, or basically the market was 50% agricultural, and it went to 15% agricultural. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you got into this while you were out there or what. This is just free talk at this point. I'm kind of wondering myself, where do you think those percentiles, right, from 50 to 15, what do you think contributes a lot of this? Is it technology now? What is...
So I have a slight idea just from business courses in college. I think that a overwhelming majority of it's gone to outsourced Basically,
buying products from other places.
so like countries like America, Britain, Japan, a lot of their products need service representatives, and a lot of times you'll get outsourced into, or companies will outsource to India for service representatives, where people will call and be like, "Hey, this shit came in the box, all fucked up, and could you like maybe do something about this?"
Right.
And then another thing, China and Asia are two of the biggest markets for I don't know how to say this properly, but the two of the biggest markets for sweatshops.
So essentially, underpaid. We're talking when we say sweatshop. That term, it means people that are working somewhere where the conditions are absolutely horrid.
Right.
So there's no any kind of health guidelines.
There is and there
underpaid.
isn't. Some companies like Nike and Reebok, I think they're under the same umbrella now at this point. But companies like that, like they have and they haven't. They've gone back and forth on the notion of like setting standards for their workers. But again, I think I'm just getting back to the point here is that I think that between outsourced work for telemarketing and customer service, and I'm going to say it again, sweatshops, I think those two have kind of consumed that 35% drop.
See, my issue becomes, right, from all of this is people are looking to quote unquote modernize their country, and because of that, a lot of the time agriculture doesn't fit into that modernization.
Right. And so we're looking at the duality of technology.
Right.
As where it's increased or it's magnified and increased the quality of life for like first world countries. Much of India is still a third world country.
That's where my problem is. You hit it right on the head. My problem with that is, even if the country is quote unquote being modernized, a lot of those jobs are covered strictly by and worked strictly by people with an education.
And they're in the cities.
And that leaves a huge portion of people that cannot fill those roles that will, I mean, it's going to take years and education to fill those roles. And so what we're seeing is, again, people put in that caste, right? Like essentially people that have a opportunity to go to school, to have opportunity to have money within their family. Again, it's people that don't have that opportunity, that can't work those jobs. And it doesn't make sense, essentially. The only way it would make sense is if education becomes more attainable and money becomes a little bit more attainable for people. And we don't see that in India. I mean, am I like shooting in the blank here? Am I hitting on something?
In the blank?
Shooting in the dark is what I meant.
No, that sounds right. You know, like cities in India are huge. People move to the city, you know. A lot of people move to the city from rural areas for opportunity.
I mean, I feel like the overwhelming majority of India is rural. And I feel like it sucks because like they move to the cities in hopes of like attaining their aspirations of becoming more wealthy, and that's kind of a story as old as time. Because like you have people in the U.S. that move to like New York and L.A. and they're just trying to get out there to find their niche. To get into
3 months later,
3 months later, they're living on Skid Row. They've got tuberculosis. They can't stop shitting themselves, and they run out of socks.
Yeah. There's this movie called Par. It's kind of like from the 70s, I think. It's a Hindi movie about some a couple who worked on a farm in Bihar, there was a conflict with the landowner, and there was a murder, and then they were kind of pinned for it, and they had to escape, and so they escaped to Calcutta, which is one of the largest cities in India, and there was no opportunity for them. And the great last scene of the movie is, in order to get just a little bit of money to survive, they were hired to swim like 5 or 6 pigs across the Ganges River, which is a huge river in Kolkata. And so there was a scene of them
Jesus fuck.
swimming the pigs. They said, you can get these pigs across the river, we'll give you some money. And they didn't have a boat or anything. They just swam with the pigs. And the mom was pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing movie. Highly recommended. Nasiruddin Shah. That's the name of the actor, yeah.
All right, so Dima just got done watching, speaking of movies.
Not the White Elephant.
Not the White Elephant. If you search the White Elephant, you'll end up watching The Elephant Man on Amazon Prime. But if you go to Netflix, you can check out a better movie called The White Tiger, which is about breaking the caste. The idea is that once in every 100 years, once in every century, I guess, is a
White tiger.
A white tiger is born who is meant to break the caste for the family and raise the family above what they
Started out as.
Yeah.
Well, they were born into.
Speaking of that, I think that the channel is going to probably start doing movie reviews here in the summer. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Something that we have in the works.
But we're getting into the caste system here a little bit more, and then I think we'll probably wrap up. But could you kind of draw that out for us and tell us exactly how the caste system
is implemented?
How many levels are there to this? How does it work? And then I don't know, what are the issues? Is there a good side to it? Please.
All right, so I'm definitely not the right person to talk about this, but I'll do my best.
From what you know.
Yeah. So people, many people in India have in their family are connected with or identified with caste, which is tied to their class. And there are four. There are four umbrella categories. Brahmin, which is ruling caste that also is a very educated class and sort of traditionally runs the Hindu temples and performs religious ceremonies for people. And then there's the warrior caste. There is the caste which is farming and crafting, I think.
Strong as fuck.
And then there's
if Dima was born to the warrior caste, they'd kill him.
I don't want to get this wrong. I feel like I'm getting this wrong. Anyway, I'm going into a lot of detail.
Keep going. I'm pulling it up.
All right, cool. And then there's
we do not want to get this wrong.
What's called an untouchable caste or a Dalit caste, which is even considered subcaste, and that's the lowest. So so these things are so embedded in society in a lot of places in India that people they identify it with themselves, and when they meet someone else, they really, really care about what another person's caste is, and particularly with marriage. People really care about who they're marrying.
You can't really, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't really marry outside of that specific level of caste.
I mean, it depends on how cool your parents are. Right? To be honest,
okay,
it depends on how cool your parents are.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I mean, if you fall in love with someone who's in a much lower caste or a much higher caste than you, your family, if they have a more relaxed attitude, maybe are more socially liberal, they might not have an issue with it. But for a lot of people, it really matters. And in fact, you'll find countless Bollywood films, intercaste love stories, where
constantly Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's they're from different castes, and the parents of the children in the higher caste are the family gets split up and they're estranged.
They're just completely abominably against it.
Yes, yeah.
So going back to the caste real quick, I have a chart here, a beautiful chart here, and I am sorry if I'm butchering any of this.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
We have the Brahmins, which is at the very top of the caste, and according to this diagram or this pyramid system here, the Brahmins are the priestly / academic class. Then we have the kshatriyas,
Mhm.
kshatriyas, which are the rulers / administrators / warriors,
Mhm.
which is exactly what you said. You were spot on. Then we have the Vaishyas,
Not sure.
Vaishyas,
Mhm.
which are the artisans / tradesmen / farmers / merchants.
That would be you.
And then we have the Chandras, which is
The Untouchables.
the manual laborers.
Shudras.
Shudras.
Would that be your Untouchables?
No, then that's even below that.
Really?
The
It's
Dalits.
The Dalits.
Yeah, it's the street cleaners and the
That'd probably be me.
menial tasks.
I'd probably be a damn street cleaner. But,
So you'll be untouchable.
Nothing wrong with
I
that.
sure am glad to live in the city where I can clean these streets.
I mean,
But you
we
hit
all
it
need
spot
clean
on, dude.
streets. All
And
right,
like Gandhi said, bro, everybody needs to be a street cleaner or street sweeper, whatever you were talking about before.
yeah, we all need, our streets to be clean, So, yeah,
Can't be rolling through the rubbish.
yeah, for real.
Well,
yeah, so-
well, damn, there you go. There you have it.
Yeah, yeah. So people, it's like, it's how people organize themselves in society, and people still really care.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, people still really care.
And that's good. I feel like this is a great place to kind of wrap this up. But I mean, just to kind of summarize here, we talked about a lot, but we kind of had a focus on what's going on currently in India with the farmers' revolution, I'd call it, and how farmers are really fighting for their survival is what it comes down to at the end of the day. But we also delved into, as we just talked about, the caste system in India. And we kind of related it to what we have here in the States to a degree, to a very minuscule degree. Obviously not as stringent as
It's
it is
apples to
in-
oranges, but they're still both fruits.
Right, right. And everything in between. Your experience in India, which was always great to listen to because it kind of not only opens up our mind, but also gives the listeners and the beautiful, beautiful listeners and viewers the opportunity to kind of take a piece of that with them.
It helps the frame of reference for sure.
Right. Right.
Cool.
So we really appreciate you coming in again, man. We enjoyed it.
It's
It
a
was
pleasure. Y'all are great. Y'all are awesome.
Yeah.
I love the show.
awesome. Of course, man. Thank
Yeah.
you. And yeah, there you have it, folks. It's been amazing to give you this episode of the 4099 podcast with your hosts Dima and
Whiskey Nick.
Whiskey Nick and
Samuel.
It's like, when you take a girl out and you drink too much. The end of the night's just a little lackluster.
Here he is.
That's me.
There he is.
and we are out.
Night, night.